scalloping. How to fix it. Very, very simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually export the normal map. And then we're going to make a little modification to it, and we're going to re-import it. So I'm going to go to File, Export Textures. And we can just come over here and sort of go, I'll make a new folder here. And we'll call this Textures. You probably would want to do this anyway. We'll select that folder. And then I haven't really talked about exporting out of Painter too much, but all you got to do in general is you want to come down to the PBR metal roughness option, and that'll usually be good enough for whatever it is that you're looking for, depending on the application. If there's something else that is needed for whatever reason, then somebody will probably let you know what that is. I'm going to go ahead and set my file type to Targa, and we'll just hit export. We can hit, I think it's done now. Let's go over to Photoshop. And here is that texture. And you can see the scalloping here. This is the normal map of that texture, not the whole thing. So because there's so many edges on my low poly, it's not super pronounced. If there were fewer edges, it would be like kind of bigger and more noticeable. But the solution is super easy, and this is why it's kind of important with cylinders, at least the long side of a cylinder. You want to set it up horizontally or vertically for the following trick. So I'm just going to, let's see if I can pop this guy off. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just randomly pick a very, very small sliver of that section there. I'm going to hit Control T, and then I'm going to hold Shift, at least in my version is Photoshop, because if I don't, it's going to do like an expanded thing, and I don't want that. But if I hold Shift, it'll let me do a non-uniform transform. And you can see now those lines are all perfectly straight, which is really cool. So all I have to do now is save it, do that over here. And then what I can do is go to Edit, where is it? Import Resources, under File, Import Resources. We'll go to Add Resources, we'll go to Textures, and then so there's my original normal map, and then here's the updated one that I just saved in Photoshop. I'll hit Import there. We need to say that this is a texture, and we can import it to the current session. And it'll automatically grab it for you. So these are my mesh maps. This is what was baked by Painter, and this is the one that I just modified in Photoshop. So all I have to do, and pay attention up here, is click and drag over. Actually, yeah, there we go. So we should have gotten, it's still going to look faceted, but it should look a lot less scallopy. So there's where we were. You can see we've got those scallops there, and when I bring it over, you see they are minimized. Again, if there weren't as many edges around the cylinder, it would be a bigger scalloping effect, but not too difficult of a fix. And if you set your UVs up right, then you can do it in a very short period of time in Photoshop. So that's just a couple of concepts that are important about what's going on with the max frontal and max rear distance, and then also what the impact is of hardening texture borders. So if we come back over to that that knife that we were looking at, you can see over here, I think there were some problems there. You can still kind of catch them if you get the lighting just right, but with the texture borders hardened, we're going to get a much cleaner look at the surfaces that we're trying to bake. If your geometry has a really sharp edge to it, like a 90-degree angle, you may want to go in and throw a little bit of a supporting edge in both the high and low poly. That'll make that transition a lot nicer. Like right there, it's totally fine. It's just those hard edges there are a little bit tough. And then also, we reduced the texel density for these interior faces there. So there's going to be a little bit less on this side to support that transition. You know, it's one of those things like, there's always a bit of a sacrifice. So if you were to make those full size, you might get this back area looking a little bit better, and that might be super important, but it's going to cost texel density across the entire rest of the asset. So, you know, it's just it's a cost-benefit analysis for all of these things that you've got to kind of play with. So we got a few minutes left in this video. I'm going to show you one more thing, which is a demonstration of the value of jumping through all those hoops to get the texel density to be as high as possible. So I'm going to grab a texture with a lot of detail on it. So give me just 1 second on that. Here's the one that we're going to use. It's just a bunch of letters. And the image is 2048, so it's yeah, whatever. We should be able to see some degradation if it gets kind of crappy looking. Maybe I should go a little higher. We'll know in a second. I can always increase that if I need to. And what I'm going to do is just have two side-by-sides here, so I need to build that out in Maya. I've already kind of done most of that work. So here's the original one. And then I've got this duplicate, and I'm just going to scoot it up. So all the names here have been updated so that these will only talk to each other, and these should only talk to each other. And we'll go ahead and update the higher one here. And by update, I mean basically remove all of the optimizations. But I'm just going to go to the low poly geo. We'll go ahead and grab all of the faces. And I'm going to go to my layout options, and we'll turn preserve 3D ratios back on. And everything else can pretty much be as it is. So in this one, oops, that's the high. This is just a random piece here. Our texel density is 166, and in our unoptimized version here, we go ahead and find, I think that's spacer low. We'll just grab the exact same piece. So we go from 166 to 120. So what is the impact of that? We're about to find out. I'm just going to grab all of the high poly geo. And export it. And then all of the low poly geo. Doesn't matter that it's in these groups. Oops, looks like I need to fix that name there. Knife flow. Okay. So we'll head back over to Painter. Just make a new file here. We'll select knife flow. We should see two sets of our knives. And oh, these need to be on different materials. I'm just going to do that real quick in Maya. So basically, when they're all on one material, they're going to try to bake to the same textures, but if they're on two different materials, then it'll create two different sets of textures, and that's what I'm looking for. And if I go to my texture set list and do an edit project configuration select, we'll go back to that updated low poly. We'll hit OK, and now we've got two. So the blend is talking to the one I just hid, and the Lambert's talking to that one. So we're going to have two different sets here of bakes and textures. So we will go to texture set settings. We can go to 2048. We'll grab the knife high, and we should, so it's going to say 14 textures because it's going to be baking two sets of everything, which is totally fine. Set this to whatever it needed to be. I can't remember. I think we might have increased it, or maybe we didn't, but whatever. We can just bump it up a notch. 2.2, and then we'll set this to by mesh name, and we'll set our sampling to 2 by 2. Okay, we'll go ahead and bake our textures. Cool. All right, so I guess we could just do a quick little spin here. So this is the optimized version, and this is the unoptimized version, and you can see there's like a little bit less fidelity there than down there. I'm not sure how it's looking after the video compression. It's noticeable, but not overwhelming. And we'll go to layers. I'm going to make a new layer here, new fill layer. I need to go to import textures. We'll go ahead and grab that texture that we made. Actually, yeah, we'll go letters texture, and we'll set this as a texture, and current session's fine. There it is. So I'm just going to drag it into the base color. And then we'll go over to our, so that's the blend. I'll go over to Lambert, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Make a layer, we'll make a fill, and let's drag it over the base color. So the size of the letters is indicative of how much extra texels we're getting, right? So like the fact that they're smaller here, that's the representation of what we're seeing in terms of a higher texel density. And you can see it's looking kind of crusty and crunchy and not super great down there, and over here it's nice and crisp. So you're going to get a much better looking result if you take the time to actually optimize your UV layout so that you're taking advantage of stacking UVs where you can and reducing, like you can see, it's really apparent the difference in texel density, but this isn't something that we're going to see very clearly here, so it's not that big of a deal, right? And we're never going to see the inside of the spacer, so that's a really good place to have saved that space, because now we're able to dedicate a lot more texture space to the places where the viewer is actually going to be paying attention. Now, I guess arguably you could have added a cut there and let that alone, but you know, whatever. It's there's always more that you could potentially do, and you can see here on this side everything is all the letters are pretty much the same size because they've all got a uniform texel density. So we're spending a lot more for these inside faces at the expense of these outside faces. So anyway, hopefully that is a useful demonstration of why it makes sense to go through and do this. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to shoot me an email or leave a note in the comments.